Hi, everybody. We're just gathering together. We're going to give everyone a minute or two to join, and then we will kick off. All right, let's give a few more seconds. Okay, 10:03. We've done our given everybody our graceful 3-minute window to get into the webinar. Hi, everybody. Welcome. Nice to see you and have you here. Thanks for joining us. Happy Wednesday. I was going to say good morning, but you're joining from all over. So good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are.
Ridiculousness of all ridiculousness.
Oh,
I'm here. We're doing it like
Erin's
this.
coming to join me in person.
We're doing it like this. We can't get it to work.
Okay. Amazing. This is
Here we are.
this is how Erin and I actually wanted to do this.
Yeah.
I think we should switch so I can drive the slides.
Okay.
All right. This is the normal. You always have the first 5 minutes of anything that you join have tech difficulties, and here we are. All right. So I'm going to start with a little bit of housekeeping, not just tech stuff. We actually wanted to be together, so this is a win, in my opinion.
It's all good.
It's all good. So housekeeping, we're recording today's session and we'll send it out in a few days. So if you want to share it, please share it. There you go. Everyone needs a space for water. Second, if you have a question, please use the Q&A tab anytime during the conversation. I was going to say presentation. We're going to answer questions. Erin and I want to leave a lot of time for questions because it's more interesting to answer what you're curious about.
Yeah.
But throw them in there anytime. And then if there's any questions we can't get to, we'll follow up one-on-one after. So everyone will get their questions answered.
And let's keep it interactive.
Yeah.
It's more fun for us.
It is more fun for us. Okay, let's get into it. So we just released our State of Payment Operations report. And
this is an annual report.
Yeah.
Is it the fourth?
It's our
All right.
It's our 4th year. So we can see some trends and some things that change and some things that don't because payment stuff kind of moves slowly sometimes.
Yeah, I know.
All right, so let's hop into the overview slide. All right, so we worked with a wonderful team called Harris Poll. You might have heard of them out there in articles that you read. And we surveyed finance and product leaders from companies like right in this middle size, so 500 and above, up to 10,000. So really working with a level of scale and complexity that's relevant for these problems. They're not the mega organizations that might have a whole team doing their own thing, and they're not a small organization that might not yet be operating at the level of payments volume or complexity where payment operations becomes like a thing they have to carry. So, like I said, payment operations and infrastructure is hairy and hard, and that's what we wanted to learn about at this like middle and large size enterprise. Some of the key findings, we're going to go through this all in detail in our hour together, but some of the key findings, let's go to the next slide, are that almost 100%, 98% of our respondents said some part of their payment operations are manual, which is like almost impossible. It's not impossible to understand when you're on the front line.
No,
but it's like shocking.
Well, for someone like me who's been doing this for almost 30 years, it's like, what? What have we been doing?
I know, we're at 2%. I know. So at some part of the process of managing payments and complexity and scale, et cetera, something is happening manual. People, email, Excel, et cetera.
Handoffs between systems,
right.
All kinds of stuff.
So speaking of systems, they're also using 6 or 7 systems. And this number has been frustratingly consistent for the last 4 years that we've done this report, we're not consolidating and bringing data together and getting it out of manual, and we're just still stitching together like a lot of different disparate systems. 13% of respondents listed more than 10 systems. I mean, that's crazy. That's a lot of moving things around.
The flip side of that is there's something, some of them are just legacy and it's hard to get off of them. But some of it speaks to the fact that we have solutions that are geared toward individual functions or steps in the process that are best of breed.
Totally.
Right? So there's a good and a bad to that statistic.
Yeah, there is. But it is a lot for the people on the line to manage inside their organizations.
No. I mean, the back office is it's a hard place to be.
It is. It's heavy.
We're working on it, but it's hard.
We're working on it. And then another way to think about this, like system sprawl and manual nature and all this stuff, is just how much time goes into managing all of this, the systems, the processes, the data. A third of our respondents are losing a day a week, and 1 in 10 are losing almost 2 days a week, 17 hours. So it's just
and that's not, a lot of it isn't value add.
No,
right? It's just routine, manual, friction in the process that is inhibiting the ability to, one, like solve real problems, for customers. For internal stakeholders. It is legitimately frustrating.
Yes, absolutely. A lot of this work is not the kind of work someone signs up and is super excited to do.
No.
All right. So then one more slide on this sort of like the landscape, what we heard about the pain of the landscape we're operating in, which is on the next page, building homegrown solutions. So a lot of our respondents are working with homegrown or semi-homegrown solutions to cobble things together, or for one of those 10 is something homegrown. And those are really expensive. They cost, $500,000, $1 million to build and maintain. And like, that's also a heavy burden that's sort of not included just in the manual reporting that we saw on the slides before.
And there's a amount of care and feeding.
Yeah.
Right. That you're having to do yourself because you built the dark.
Yeah. And then, someone leaves or a team leaves and you're really stuck with a system that's hard to maintain.
Yeah.
So
and you're not devoting attention to things that are really differentiating in your
that are value add for whatever business you're in, that are very unique to the business you're in. So these are some examples of the types of systems that get built and maintained: payment sending systems, bank connection, internal ledger database, sub-ledger databases, lots of crazy workflows around reconciliation. Some of those are vertical specific. Some of those are company specific.
Yeah. And some of them are really idiosyncratic to whoever's doing the job.
Yeah,
like
their
they've
workflow.
Put together their own sort of bespoke workflow, little Excel, little of this, little of that.
Yeah, totally. And they want to do it their way.
These are major impediments to automating the back office.
Absolutely. So where are we going to go? Like, what did we learn about where you guys in the audience and the respondents to this research want to go? A lot of companies have already invested in instant payment rails and the surrounding systems that are going to help, but it's like we're dipping our toe in the water, right? So the number of folks that currently use FedNow and RTP is over 50%. That's a great number.
Yeah.
That shows like a lot of willingness to experiment, try things, get on the path to reducing some of that pain we just saw on the previous flu slides. And then almost the whole rest are planning to do so in the next 6 months. 12 months. So really have immediate plans, concrete plans to pilot something or try part of a workflow or part of a payment flow and dip their toe in the water. So that's great to see. And some of the use cases you would expect. So payouts and disbursements, of course, these are credit rails. So we're going to pay out, we're going to remit and manage bill payments. You have a little bit of different data, so we'll get into that in maybe 15 minutes or so. Or there's a lot of excitement about requests for pay. So we're going to dig into that one specifically later in the webinar because both of us are hearing a lot about that from the market.
Yeah.
All right, one more, which is to say, of course, these many systems, complicated workflows, and a lot of data and like rote data wrangling. This is
like data wrangling.
Data rodeos. This is a really good place for the next generation of AI.
Yeah.
And there is a lot of excitement about the opportunity in and around payments and what this generation of Gen AI, our next generation of ML and traditional AI tools can do in this market, in this place, in the day-to-day that you guys experience all the time. So we wanted to ask some questions about, like, what does that actually mean? Not just we're excited about AI. We all read those headlines a lot. We even write those headlines sometimes, but specifically what parts of managing the payments landscape, of running payment operations inside an organization, what parts do we all feel like AI is best served to tackle? So reconciliation came out first. That makes a lot of sense to us as a product team here.
My favorite use case.
Yeah, and a lot of sense to anyone who's sort of been in and around the back office a long time.
Yeah.
Like, great place to be using AI and Gen AI. Using the tools to increase revenue, so squeezing things out of the system and investing in better places, getting transparency and visibility into what's going on, integrating into banks, that's an interesting one, and just overall providing a better experience to customers. When you streamline and make things efficient inside, that does trickle out to the customer experience, whatever customer experience you're.
In terms of predictability, transparency, all sorts of things.
Yeah, absolutely. Issue resolution.
Yeah.
All right, so those are some of the highlights. Of course, if you want to read it, it's a big, long, really interesting research report. So I'm sure many of you have downloaded it, but go for it if you want to get more into the details. I think we should start with instant payments, because that was sort of one of the most interesting pieces of research that came out. The number of people trying it and where we're going.
And the consistency of the enthusiasm.
Yes.
So let's dig into that a little bit. First, I have to just acknowledge, like, we totally foiled the system. We're supposed to be in 2 separate rooms. We're for the sound to be all perfect and all of that. And just earlier this morning, Rachel and I were like, "Oh, it's such a bummer." And then we couldn't get the setup in the other room to work. So here we are.
It's a mess. It's how it was meant to be.
Exactly. Okay, so let's collect ourselves. You know, I echo the enthusiasm. We've been talking, I personally have been talking about real-time payments for over a decade. I'm embarrassed to admit how long. So it doesn't surprise me that we've got this groundswell of interest, because now we're reaching a level of adoption and distribution that it makes sense you should start using it now, right?
Yeah.
Like it was a little premature before.
Yeah.
So on the one hand, that doesn't surprise me at all that we have this level of enthusiasm.
We're at 70% coverage of DDAs. I mean, that's a level where you can try some flows out.
Absolutely. And we've got some pent up anticipation.
Yes.
I want to acknowledge, though, that it's not just the speed of these transactions, the instant nature, that's compelling and that drives the interest, right? So obviously the money gets there instantly, but these systems are 24/7. They operate on the weekend. They don't keep bankers hours, right? So that means that we can do more with this infrastructure at different times than we have been able to in the past. So that is a piece of what makes this compelling, that's driving interest. The other element that's really important is that there is this data capacity. We have this XML ISO 20022 spec that underlies the infrastructure both here in the United States and around the world, and that we're moving to for wires as well. So we've sort of coalesced around this, and it means that we can, the funds movement can be accompanied by data. And we all know data is the holy grail.
Yeah, of course.
Okay, right? Like, what's this money for? Where did this come from? So that's really important. And then the last element of this is we've gotten feedback from users, and that the pricing they expect the pricing to be reasonable.
Yeah.
Now, it's a little early yet. We haven't got mature commercialization of these solutions.
It's not coming out the gate.
No,
so high that
it's not egregious.
Yeah.
And so those are all elements that are driving interest.
Yeah.
And in terms of sort of current use cases, and we have a Bain slide that shows this, disbursements are obviously a really important early use case, particularly for that 24/7 availability, right? And the instantaneous nature of it. The next one that is one of my favorites is this whole notion of, we can collectively call it funding or settlement. Some of it is me to me from my account in one institution to my account in another institution. Some of it is from my checking to my brokerage, those sorts of things. And then some of it is from your acquirer to a merchant, giving them immediate access to funds
that they are owed.
Even on the weekends.
Yes.
Right. And payroll and earned wage access. And I know you've been heavily involved in a lot of that. Those are all use cases where we're seeing a lot of use today.
Yeah.
And as I look forward and sort of anticipate where things are going, I think B2B and sort of invoiced billing transactions are logical, but there's some impediments there, and we'll get into some of that.
Yeah.
But one thing that I do want to highlight for this group, if you hadn't been paying attention, TCH RTP is expanding its transaction limit from $1 million to $10 million. Effective February.
Yeah.
And
literally in the countdown.
So that means, oh, wow. Particularly for those sort of intercompany settlement type transactions.
That part I'm so interested
exactly,
in.
Where the time value of money really matters, right? If I'm a treasurer and I can move that $10 million instantly.
Yeah.
Oh, here we go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Here we go. So that starts to really like, oh, wow, okay. I'm sitting up in my chair.
Well, and both sides are two subsidiaries of the same organization.
Right. We don't have all of
these counterparty things going on.
And let's remember, a lot of B2B are recurring purchasing
supply
from people that know one another.
Yes.
So it opens up a lot of those use cases. And between sort of the, in B2B, immediacy doesn't really matter. These are scheduled transactions. I'm giving you terms. I've already delivered the goods and services.
Right.
But when you finally do get around to paying, you can pay immediately and hold your money for as long as possible.
Right.
And then I can get the money as fast as
both
possible.
Both sides win because it's not in the system.
And we get the data.
Yeah.
Back to reconciliation.
And maybe reducing some of those 10 systems that are just for keeping track of the data from when you knew why the money should move to the day it moves to 30 days later. There's so much of payment operations is just following that information through the life of a payment.
Yeah. Yeah. And that life cycle, I'm going to steal my thunder.
Can't steal your own thunder.
It's been batched.
Yeah, 100%.
And that's literally what we're talking about. We're going to get into this more. Okay.
Yeah.
Keep going.
Okay.
I want to hear if my use cases, and we can drop my slide, if they're resonant with what you're experiencing here at Modern Treasury.
Absolutely. So for sure, we have customers in payroll experimenting with this. One of the very obvious 24/7 use case and verticals where we have seen uptake, and we have significant uptake. We're doing more than $1 billion a year across our customers that we're enabling, doing well over $1 billion a year on these rails. So these are real in production use cases for mid-size and large companies.
No, you guys have been on the vanguard.
Yeah. And we're helping companies sort of get through all these transformations it takes to run real time. But the use case that I think is so wonderful to understand is real estate. Because everyone can kind of imagine what it's like to go in and deal with rent payments or to go buy a house. And when you buy a house, you walk into this office and then you wire, and then you're waiting for the biggest purchase of your life to be wired, and it has to be a Tuesday morning.
You're completely fraught.
Yeah, you're fraught, and you actually decided to buy it on the weekend, but you have to pay for it, take off work and go pay for it on a Tuesday or Wednesday at 11 a.m.
And sign a bunch of paper.
Literally
with a pen.
So we have a couple customers that are reimagining that and trying to bring to market real-time 24/7 buy it on the weekend home purchases and paying out real estate agents because they're in the transaction. So we have a top 10 brokerage who's a customer of our side. They're wonderful. And one of the reasons they've had such an incredible growth rate is that their real estate agents get paid out real time because they use RTP, and they have for years on Modern Treasury.
Talk about aligning incentives.
Yes. And it's a use case that everyone can imagine. I can't really imagine a supply chain workflow because I've never really run a logistics. I know you can, but it's not like I've ever run a trucking business personally.
Our audience understands this one.
You do.
Right.
So
that's a good one.
Anyway, I think there's two sides of it. There's a lot of excitement, but there's some trepidation and fear. So you've worked with more people across more verticals than almost anyone in payments. Tell us a little bit about what is holding back. Where does that
for
nervousness come
for
from?
real-time payments, or for request to pay, or sort of the combination? Because I think one of the things that I was reflecting on in anticipation, I actually put on this is ridiculous. I did a video on LinkedIn this morning about request to pay.
Well, what'd you say? Tell us.
I recorded it last night and scheduled it for this morning, but I was getting ready for our conversation today. And I was thinking about I believe that a request to pay, that sort of e-bill functionality, is fundamental to unlocking the value of this new infrastructure. And I have been saying this for a long time. But I was really reflecting on what's holding us back.
Yeah.
And I've been talking about some of the same things. We've talked about them on stage together. But what finally clicked for me last night as I was getting ready to do this is right now, and I'm sort of keyed up on this anyway, because I've been paying a lot of attention to financial fraud and how businesses and consumers are being manipulated and are being perpetuating or creating transactions themselves.
Yeah.
But in a circumstance where they really ought not to be doing it, right? They've been fooled.
Yeah.
And in that climate, as an industry, in order to combat that, we are creating and aggressively signaling, be careful, be careful.
Yes.
The bank will never ask you for money. The bank will never send you these types of messages.
Yes.
Yet at the exact same time, in order to commercialize and use
it is those exact messages,
we need to send those exact types. It's not the same message, but it's very, very close.
Yes.
And we're basically shooting ourselves in the foot.
Yeah.
And we can't commercialize and realize the value of this new infrastructure until we deal with the push payment fraud conundrum.
Yeah.
And so I had that realization last night and like made this dorky video and put out like a plea, like, let's work on this together. So we'll see what comes of that. And I'm asking for people here to pay attention.
Yeah.
We need to address this, and it's a serious problem, and it can't be done bilaterally. This is a federated issue. So
and
it's call to action.
Yes, and it's a counterpoint to why we're seeing uptake in certain use cases where this is
not in others.
Correct.
Exactly. The other things that we do need to pay attention to, in addition to fraud, which is a legitimate concern, is, how do I address this request to pay?
Yeah.
Right? How do I send it to you? If you're a consumer,
where do I go?
Presumably, the banks, many of them own Zelle. There's a nice directory there that'll help us get to consumer transactions, which we have an alias directory to link up cell phone numbers and emails with bank account information. And that will be great. Businesses, not so much. So that if we really want to think about B2B, we're going to have to overcome that hurdle.
Yeah.
And then another one, which is really for the bankers that are paying attention to this.
There's a few on.
Yeah, we need to get beyond our fears of cannibalization. We need to use request to pay in a rail agnostic manner and allow a wide variety of responses. They may have different cost implications. We have to signal to the consumer expectations about what it means in terms of
timeline,
recourse, and what it's going to feel like. But we already have very competent use of these capabilities where we're doing sort of like a failover. If I can't use the real-time rail, I'm going to use ACH or I'll just say the ACH. So this sort of hybrid approach, we're in the market today, so it shouldn't be that complicated. But let's sort of step away from the rails and price transactions according to their value.
Yeah. And in closed loop networks, consumers have gotten used to the request to pay function, right? Think about the modern consumer apps, and I can say, hey, Erin, reminder, pay me back for lunch.
Absolutely.
So there's some path there, and then there's some trepidation.
But we need to
all come together.
Scale it,
100%.
bring it together, and collaborate with one another.
Yeah. Imagine that.
Yeah.
One part of this instant payments landscape that we haven't talked about is inside the company that's trying these things out, whatever flow or, part of the process they're going to work on. It involves a really different tech stack and workflow surrounding it. I mean, we're going from batch to 24/7.
Yeah.
And now if we're going to buy a house on the weekend, like the title team needs to think about what it takes to staff and run everything on the weekend. So what are your thoughts about that, like next concentric circle out of the operational, what it really means to facilitate and run these payments for many of the folks on the line are like inside corporates thinking about what this transformation.
And they're like, wait a minute.
Exactly.
Wait a minute.
Yeah.
It is a true paradigm shift. And, but having said that, the batches exist because we used to put, I mean, this is really fundamental, but you used to put a payment in an envelope with a list of what you were paying for.
I mean, and even before batches, the bank would check, and then we got to that. Yeah.
And operations system, from a system standpoint, we used to, like, we made payments via check and we batched them.
Yes.
Right? We batch process checks.
Yes.
We did it overnight.
Yes.
There used to be these big reader sorter machines and.
Right. We have pictures about them in some of our blogs, like those. Yeah.
No, and I worked on that. I worked on that. I've been in those rooms. We're very loud.
Yeah.
So all of our, like everything, the way that the bank operations work, the way that a corporate back office works, everything is geared toward outdated modalities.
Yep.
And so the resistance or the concern is absolutely legitimate. But when we move to, people like to use the term autonomic transactions or like one-to-one transactions.
Real-time gross settlement.
It unlocks all of this value in the back office in terms of understanding, being able to reconcile automatically, understanding what the context is for a transaction. And that benefit is so powerful that I think that will help motivate individuals within departments to champion this.
Yep.
And then get the attention of the powers that be within their organization to explore doing this. And then once you begin to sort of realize, wait, yes, okay, someone needs to monitor the shop on the weekend, right? But we can also use some bots to do that. So you don't have to go to work. And if we can unlock the ability to manage these behaviors as they're occurring and have the insight to the data, have the availability of the funds, and be able to use that information and the information associated with a transaction. Look, if something's gone wrong with a transaction, I don't want to wait until tomorrow to find out.
It's much harder to deal with.
Right. And I don't have to do all this sort of triage.
Yeah.
I want to be able to solve the problem and deal with my customer or my counterparty or whatever, shipment is stuck at a port and solve it. So it's going, like, let's be realistic. This is going to take some time.
Yeah.
But we know from your survey results that there is a desire to try these new things, and there is an understanding of the value and the efficiency and the data unlock that this promises. So we've got the pull. As an industry, we need to come and respond.
Yeah. I mean, I think the hypothesis you're describing, another way to say it is, it's a huge transformation from batch to real time. But because of the data benefits and the process benefits and bringing AI into the equation, the total workload will go down.
Yeah.
That's the hypothesis. And we've seen it on the front lines with customers that we've helped through. But that's what you have to really believe to undergo this.
But you have to have the faith.
Yes.
And you have to have the wherewithal to manage the organizational change.
Yes. And that part is for real.
And that stuff's real.
Yes.
And that's why my hair is gray.
And it can feel very insurmountable. Like, work is siloed when it's batch. It looks more like step by step and process
you do your
by process.
Step and you hand it to me.
And I do
my
step and my tool, and then we go here. And that paradigm really has to change.
Some of it is going to be and we're already seeing this, if you like go hang out in the AFP, there's a generational shift.
Yes.
And so the
Expectations are changing.
next generation of people in accounting and finance and payment operations have this expectation of a more consumer-like orientation and things being real time. So there, I mean, yes, it's hard. All good things that are have value are worth work.
Yes, absolutely.
And this is definitely worth doing.
Yeah. So some of these surrounding pain points we see with customers considering this or going through the transformation are this cross-team step-by-step thing we just talked about. I do mine, you do yours, each in a tool. Very brittle audit / visibility, both forward-looking, but especially rear-facing. That's one of the problems of batch. You batch it up and you just lose context. That's part of how it works.
Yeah.
That makes downstream exception handling hard. And so, yes, you might have to run investigations or cases or exceptions 24/7 or on the weekends. However, each individual case really shrinks in size because you have all the data and all the context and information to take action in the moment. But that's a real transformation in workflow, in cases, in case concept.
And I also think one of the things that we haven't acknowledged is that paradigm shift as we move to a push scenario means a lot of the risk mitigation has occurred upstream. In advance.
That's right.
As opposed to downstream.
Yep.
So we're not backward looking, we're forward looking. So part and parcel with this shift is pre-work that's happening around counterparties and risk mitigating the pre-transaction initiation environment.
Yeah. I mean, one of the
which is happening.
Yes.
But all of these things are sort of happening in concert with one another and not necessarily coordinated or methodical.
Yeah, or collaborative, like you said earlier. One of the use cases I think about a lot is when someone is rear-facing, looking at the transaction and trying to investigate what happened. So much of the escalation ends up in secure email to and from your bank.
Oh, God.
And imagine our customers who operate at scale, these 10,000 person companies and some on the phone, multiple banks, multiple rails.
Process.
And it's very tough.
It's
so like secure email, while it's doing something to protect us all on both sides, is not the best in class.
It is not the way we're going to manage the future.
Correct. So that's just a very visceral one for me. We've already gotten those emails and clicked on the link and logged in, and you're just
like, oh my God, isn't there a better way?
Yes. So we can spend a little more time on this, or we could go to our like spicy topic of AI.
You want to get spicy?
Yeah.
Well, it's so in the back office, we've got 10 systems, 7 systems, whatever. And we've got Marge or Mary or Jim, whose job it is to manage this section of the end-to-end workflow.
Yeah.
Right? Like, this is my job, this is my function, and I know exactly how to do it, and I've got a way that I do it, and I got a little Excel template that's helping me out, and I've got, my
whole flow.
And I've got I do an SQL query over here, and I get this data, and I know how to manipulate it, and then it gets uploaded, and that's how we're knitting together the disparate systems in the back office.
Yeah.
And in the last, it's been over a year now, I have spent an inordinate amount of my time thinking about the application of AI in payments broadly, but given my history and my area of emphasis and focus in the back office.
Yeah.
And sure, we're going to get to the point where we have agents purchasing and all that, and then whatever, I talk about that. But in this context, I can use a little smarter robot to go and do the SQL query and take that data and manipulate it and upload it over here. Like all of that sort of bespoke, high friction, highly customized routines that are going on in the back office that function or that serve to knit together all those disparate systems. Our little agents are going to do those for us. And it sounds like, fancy. It's not that fancy. No. It's going to happen. And they're going to have discrete authority, right? This little bot only does this little job, but it's going to do it over and over and well at scale. And it's going to knit together all this
So we already have.
I almost said a bad word.
We already have a baby version of this in Modern Treasury because we're extremely excited about AI in these processes.
I'm like a kid. I'm like one of your I'm like your I'm literally like your toddler. My God. But for the first time, like I have been trying to solve these problems for my whole career.
And now we have some tools that can really do it.
Yeah, we're gonna do this.
Yeah.
We're gonna do this. And you can keep those 10 systems if you want.
Yeah. But we're going to pull them together. So one of the things that we've been exploring, and we have in pilot right now, is bringing data into Modern Treasury and using AI to do the mapping. One of the hardest parts, you've been in these big transformations, like go into the mainframe, pull up the data, and then understand the data and map it to a new system. That is a huge part of what payment operations and back office teams deal with.
And it's an enormous impediment.
Of course.
And it's like a psychological impediment. Yes. Anyone who's done it is like, oh God.
Yeah. Of course. You have this like natural anaphylactic reaction. So we're working on tools and have some early tools to just drop information into the system and we auto suggest the mapping. Now, the human, we're not in the full agent stage. The human is still checking and I understand the raw data.
Or Tim or Joe that has been in the back office has the responsibility to
12 of these 13 mappings are accurate, but this, you didn't understand, or like, oh, we have a problem with our system where the dates are wrong and change this, do that. But that's still making Marge 10x more effective in the flow she has today with like an agent helping her, but not taking action. Then we develop trust, understanding, learning, custom data, and then we get to the future or the middle stage future you're talking about. So this is a place, it's like not an obvious place. It's not necessarily even payment specific. It's data specific, but data is workflow.
But what do you think is going on in the back office?
Yes, exactly.
The money movement part is easy.
Yeah.
It's all this other stuff
everything else
that is causing the friction and the hiccups. That's what your survey demonstrates.
Right. So huge excitement about where AI is going to play in payment operations. And this particular place is one we're really excited about.
Yeah.
I know you've done a little bit of research. I also want to leave a lot of time for questions. Do we want to share a little bit of it?
Just highlight like this AI in payments, AI in financial services. This is happening. It's no longer experimentation. We're in full scale production. A lot of it is, customer service rep, optimizing, presenting information to salespeople so that they are ready for a particular engagement with a customer.
Yep.
Unbelievable amounts of use cases in sort of IT and operations and coding and all that good stuff. And this is what there's, I don't know, untold number of Bain teams running around doing this at scale, in production, in financial services.
Yes.
So this is real.
So we talked about the unstructured data part. Do you want to just show the feasible use cases, the one of those slides? Just like it's real.
Yeah.
Okay. No more slides.
Let's get in. Look, we have all these questions coming.
Okay. All right.
Let's have some fun.
Let's just close out the AI thing and then we'll answer. Which is to say, I think there's sort of 3 stages that we just outlined through our conversation together. The first is what I talked about, which is AI being an assistant.
Yes.
Hey, I've learned I'm going to make a suggestion.
Yeah.
But
human in the loop.
In the loop.
And all of the use cases that I talked about in production, they're all human.
Exactly.
All human in the loop.
We're just using this to supercharge or to go more quickly and efficiently to run more with the same size of team.
Right. The AI is not doing the
underwriting in any way.
It is not,
It's not decisioning, it's not mapping data, it's not moving information from place or moving money from place to place. It's just allowing teams to run more efficiently and with better information. Yeah. Then we'll get to a middle stage where all that teaches around agents with the discrete authority you talked about to do one thing.
Individual, like basically smarter robots.
Right. And then we'll get to the actual future where transactions might have different people on other sides. But that's quite far away, in my opinion.
I actually think it's going to happen sooner, but it's going to be wrapped with the safeguards that we use today. Like we have a bunch of things, like you probably have a corporate card, right? And that corporate card is not going to let you do certain things.
It doesn't let me do very much, to be honest.
Actually, and there's a reason for that.
Yeah,
and it has limits in it.
Yeah.
And so we can take exactly
that
and apply it to these little
Yes.
purchasing bots.
Yes.
So it's entirely you
So it's
can
the same thing, baby
you can
steps.
you can ring fence it, you can limit the damage that it can do.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah,
I
absolutely.
mean, this is going to happen, and it's going to happen sooner than you think.
Yeah, that's true. We're already using AI especially in our reconciliation engine. So not just in the data mapping process, but in suggesting like 10,000 transactions over here, 10,000 invoices over here, or 10,000 reasons that my business thought money should move. Here's the 3 that we think might be. Can you make the match for Marge? Can you make the match for us?
Yeah.
Like, sure, nice to go from 10,000 to 3 using AI, Gen AI and traditional good old ML systems to like reduce the problem space
together.
and then confirm, put them together.
Yes.
Human, make the final click,
Yes.
then it's auditable, etc. So that's been a very cool process. For
and
us.
I think you've done a really nice job of taking our enthusiasm and making it concise. But I think one thing I'd love to add to that is, the new stuff is a complement to the very mature use of AI and ML in payments today.
ML is one of the places where payments is one of the places where ML has
exceedingly mature. So what we're doing is using the new capabilities to deal with a bunch of unstructured data.
Yes.
That is allowing us to take it, feed it into the models, enrich the models, and work with the output of those models.
Yes.
So it's very symbiotic. Aren't you a scientist?
Yes.
Yeah. It's a good thing.
It just has an existing structure to step into.
Exactly.
Yes.
And because payments has been at this for a while, we can actually really have accelerated benefit.
I agree.
And we are.
Okay, let's answer some real questions, and then we got to only half of what we prepared to talk about. That's typical.
I know, and it's fun because I recognize the names on the so there's people here that I know.
I love that,
and that you know too.
Okay, so the first one I see is what are the key factors, the merchants, the fintech partners, the banks underlying that will drive RTP and A to A. So, what do you think are some of the leading indicators for this to actually change?
I think we see we have early adoption in a bunch of use cases. And those are, it makes tremendous sense. We've talked about some of that. I think we do need to overcome the halo of anxiety about fraud. And it's not unique to
but that's this use case thing we keep coming back to of it's your company and starting with payroll and places where
known counterparties in B2B where we know one another. And in conjunction with implementing upfront safeguards, proactive
to become a known counterparty.
Yeah, proactive work. All of which you can use AI to streamline, right? It's not as hard as it used to be.
Yeah.
So we need to do that, and that will help sort of move it forward.
Yeah.
I think any of the, to be a little controversial, we have a very mature, effective card infrastructure. Mm-hmm. And we have a lot of people that are addicted, for lack of a better word, to their rewards. That's not going to change.
I mean, we have a phrase that payment rails never die. We just add more.
So it checks.
Exactly. Cash. Yeah. And it has a purpose.
Yeah.
Okay, I'm gonna summarize a few of these together. So
because we're getting a lot.
What do we think the real-time payments and the instant payment flow is going to mean for ledgering? What is that? So in an ACH and wire world, there's sort of a understood batch-based flow into a ledgering system inside an organization. Now we're handling real-time data with real-time counterparty or customer expectations, recon expectations downstream. What does that mean for ledgering? I'll answer too when we see this on the front lines.
Well, I think, not long ago, the word ledger was sort of a arcane term.
Yeah.
Maybe some accountants used it. And now anybody in the world of payments talks about ledgers.
Yes.
So we need shared ledgering in order to manage visibility
And data.
data in an increasing real-time world.
Yep.
Like this is fundamental, and it needs to be trusted. And we've had we have very clear examples of how not to do it.
Yes.
So
Very public examples, unfortunately.
Yeah, but on the one hand, that really demonstrates why it's important. Look, it would be good for you to share from the MT standpoint the types of things that you're doing, because I think.
Yeah, we see this on the front lines. So I think I just went to a show at the Met. I was in New York last week for work, and I snuck out and went to the show at the Met, the Sienna show. It's about to close.
Unbelievable.
It was unbelievable. And the artist whose name I'm completely forgetting right now, because you have to forget something when you're on a webinar, made his early money decorating the cover of Ledger books in 1278. I just took a picture of it and shared it with the team yesterday. So ledgers have been around a long time, and they were notebooks that artists used to decorate. We are coming into a world with this level of real-time and instant payment interactions where the ledger has to keep up at a scale, volume, and performance that is very known in the database world for anyone who's been in the tech infrastructure world, for the tech world for last 20, 30 years, but hasn't necessarily been how companies managing payments, teams managing payments inside companies had to think about their systems. Ledgers were much more batch, downstream, obviously highly accurate. It's very important for them to be accurate, but they didn't necessarily have to perform at the scale and with the speed that they have to perform in an instant payments world and in a real-time customer experience world. If I'm showing a balance, like it better be accurate, it better be 24/7 because you're looking on your phone.
Yeah, and in a intercompany setup or in a wholesale money movement standpoint, I'm not going to call and berate my customer for not paying me if the transaction's been held up in a batch.
Yeah, yes. So
we haven't even gotten into revenue recognition.
Right, of course. So the requirements on a subledger system have gone through the roof in the last 10 years, and it's because the counterparty and customer requirements are increasing. Yeah. So then the system requirements go up. So that's one theme I would say. The second theme I would say is that there are a lot of people who built ledgers once before, built a subledger system once, and literally walk out of that and say, never again in my life will I ever do that again. Yeah. So much larger appetite to use third-party services and bring the expertise, the scale, like traditional infrastructure. There's many incredible infrastructure companies. I think that mentality, part of the generational shift, part of the technology shift, that mentality is coming to subledgering.
And you don't need to build it yourself.
Exactly. But that's a relatively new theory for an organization to come to, I would say, in the last 10 years. So that's a theme we see in ledgering, subledgering.
I think it's also important to indicate that this is a subledger. This is a practical process-specific
delivery of goods and services.
Process-specific ledger that in turn is going to feed your accounting systems of ledger. It is not a replacement. No. It is a complement.
Correct.
And God knows that stuff isn't going to run in real time.
No, and it's not. It's built for accuracy and auditing and reporting.
And it doesn't need to.
Right.
But this is a way that allows us to meet the speed and the expectations, but preserve they perform sanctity almost. Like back to the Sienna exhibit. Like this is really important, but we want the system of record is one thing.
Correct.
But this ledger is, for all intents and purposes, the official.
It's like delivering the customer experience.
Well, it's the official joint understanding of what the bank understands, what the software company understands, coming together. It's engendering trust.
Yes. And you're missing the counterparty or the customer.
Yeah. Right. Yeah. And they may or may not have access to the ledger, but customer-facing tools will have access to the ledger. So what the way I think about ledgers is as a critical component of trust infrastructure.
That's exactly right.
In our new world.
Yeah, that's exactly right. So I think those are some wandering thoughts on ledgers. We've only done 2 of our questions. Okay, how do you think an alias directory
all these people
take root? What would be
in B2B?
Yeah, and what would be app agnostic sort of this? Yeah. We're talking about collaboration and federation sort of moving above.
And this is a very B2B question. So in the world of of B2B, one of the things that I've been paying a lot of attention to is the notion of a legal entity identifier, which is not new. It's about 10 years old. And in the securities world, there's been sort of a coalescence around this notion of a legal entity identifier. Mm-hmm. What I'm very interested in is taking that legal entity identifier that is associated with, Bain Consulting or Modern Treasury or, whoever, and then appending to it a bunch of tokenized accounts and a hierarchy of account structures.
Right.
That can be whatever the use case or the context, you can assign one of those to a consulting project. You can assign it to an individual invoice. You can assign it to a line of business or a product launch or a department or a geography, whatever. And then those individual tokenized accounts, in whatever form they take, they may be 16-digit, they may look like a 16-digit PAN, they may look like an IBAN, they may look like an account, an RTN account number. Combination, but we then can use those safely as a way to address requests to pay and invoices as well as money. And then it will drive automation and logically tie the money and the information to whatever meaningful framework the business needs to run to post the transactions, to analyze the performance of a new product, to understand the profitability of a particular customer, whatever logic they have brought. So that's something that I've been spending a lot of time talking about, thinking about, and trying to understand what it's going to take to bring that to market at scale. And I think it's going to come out of the multinational wholesale money movement world where it's already happening for securities. And then it will infuse into this world, probably in conjunction with DLT and smart contracts and all that sort of API-driven logic for discrete money movement.
Fascinating.
Yeah.
Another question from the audience. Any particular problems or areas of challenge you've seen in this payment operations landscape for specific verticals? We ended up talking about real estate. We ended up talking a little bit about B2B and supply chain, but in education or in consumer or financial services that we didn't get to?
There are instances, you can talk about healthcare where you've got sensitivity around managing data.
Yeah. And oh my gosh, talk about system creep. That's my old world healthcare. Yeah. Special.
That's a different topic for a different day.
Yeah.
And a lot of you get industries where, like, I did a shocking amount of work in consumer packaged goods, direct store delivery, where you had a lot of promotional activity, which caused an enormous amount of friction. So those are places where we can take the same tools and we can just apply them slightly differently. But that's where verticalized software or sort of old school B2B networks that today run on EDI can evolve in time to move to APIs, then probably to agents. To facilitate a lot of that. But I can see a very logical progression, but I think it's going to happen within those ecosystems that already exist. I think it's very hard to port a set, like an industry vertical, to a new thing altogether. It needs to sort of infuse the tools they already have.
Yeah,
so that's the way I think.
EDI would transform and bring along with it, a PBM and the pharmaceutical and the couponing program.
They have that stuff. Yeah, because back to brittle systems.
Yeah, it gets really complicated, and you have to be doing this type of real-time routing.
Yeah.
Let's take one more. How about payment orchestration, least cost routing, fee management across Rails? I would say. It exists a lot in cards, which is not our space. I would actually say this is one of the areas of interest specifically for RTP and FedNow. If the corporate that's coming to us for transformation is thinking about it in comparison to wires. And I mean, really, that is actually the best analog out there. We have a big thing we have to dispel, which is that it's not an ACH replacement; it's a wire replacement.
Yeah.
Right? It's credit only, and it's.
But it's going to start to get really interesting because the wires are going in March to ISO 20022. Mm-hmm. So that actually
brings them together.
Yeah, creates. It really does create that. And I don't think it's going to be least cost routing. I actually want to divorce the conversation from the cost and talk about the value. So what am I trying to accomplish? Am I sending something overseas or am I sending it domestically? Okay, that's one choice.
Yeah.
Do I have information that's accompanying this? Do I want to have a set of logic that releases the transaction and have this be API driven? That feels like it's going to be the real-time rails as opposed to the wire systems.
Yes.
Right? Like, and who is my counterparty? Is there a risk mitigation opportunity here? Is there a working capital opportunity here? Like, what is the benefit that either the sender or the receiver is going to enjoy, and what are they willing to pay for that?
Yeah, and then
it's a very different conversation to beating up my vendors on the cost of a transaction.
Totally. So I would just say that we've had large organizations who have analyzed how much they're spending on wires. And even if they take, obviously not all of them, because some of them are well suited for that rail, and put them into the RTP and FedNow instant rails, the fee savings are enough to realize ROI, not on a complete transformation.
You gotta be doing a lot of wires.
Yeah, but some organizations and verticals are.
Title companies.
Exactly. And the ROI is significant, especially to get to like a first milestone or to fund the first step of a journey. So we're working with companies to think about it that way. Like, think about it piecemeal. Then the value unlock is the next step of the journey. Yeah. It goes from there.
Yeah. And I just want us to get on my high horse. Like, I want to stop talking about the cost of the transactions, and I want to start talking about the value associated with the whole package.
Yeah, absolutely.
And what is that worth? And if it's worth something, people are going to pay for it.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, well, we didn't get to every question, so we will follow up with a bunch of you one-on-one afterwards. But I'm going to ask the last question of the day, and then I'm going to answer it too. But I'll ask you first, which is, okay, let's say we're doing this again next year. We release this report every year. So it's we've had tech difficulties. We get to hang out together in person. And, wave a magic wand. What has changed? Like it's 12 months from now. What's different on the ground that you want to happen by the time we do this next year?
I think necessity is going to force us to come together and deal with the fraud. I don't think it'll be solved, but I think we'll be
in a different place.
We'll be in a different place. We need to be. Yeah. I mean, we just have to be. Like that, we've got to figure that out. I think that we're going to recognize that process change is hard.
Yep.
And it takes leadership and conviction and real benefit, and the people whose jobs are changing, who are probably the most frightened of this, actually need to be involved because they've got all the insight in their minds about how it works today.
Yeah.
So we've really got to find a way culturally to talk about the new tools in a way that is empowering rather than threatening.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think in the next year, we're not going to have a wholesale loss of employment.
Right.
It's going to come a little later.
My magic wand dream would be, we're talking more about the data visibility, the monitoring, and like the internal observability. That's a very engineering word. I just haven't found a good replacement word for it. That these systems bring to an organization. Like, what does it mean to have full transparency all the time into everything?
And how do we measure it?
What's the value of that?
Yeah.
What workflow transformation can happen on the back of that? So that's a piece that's like the pain and suffering of some of our audience. Like, that's the transformation I want some of them to have gone through in the next year when we're sitting down.
And then let's measure it.
Yes.
And then we can figure out what we're willing to pay for.
Yeah.
Because that then solves the whole discussion about rail and price.
Yes.
and moves us to a conversation
About value, business growth.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Time value of money, working capital, all that good stuff. Ooh, I look forward to this conversation.
I know. It will
In
be
a year.
good. Okay.
And maybe we'll do it in a way that like some of you can come.
Okay, you guys, we're like about to be over, which is typical of Erin and I. We got to half our questions and we're going to go over time, but thank you for coming. We'll follow up with some of you one-on-one and reach out anytime to either of us or to Boehner Modern Treasury. Thanks for spending an hour with us. Bye.
Bye.